Welcome to the Science of Peace podcast. This is our Sunday podcast. Oh, it's 11:11 right now on my central time. That's really cool. I'm your host, Yogi Chris, PhD, founder of Ninth Limb Yoga, and the show is sponsored by Ninth Limb Yoga. I'm very excited to have part two from the previous interview with Yogi Robert Boustany, yoga master also from Houston, Texas, and we're going to be going hardcore into the Hatha Yoga theory. And before we really get going with that, if you are following this on iTunes or YouTube, leave a comment, subscribe. We got a lot of great content that comes out. And I say we because I got a whole team. I mean, maybe I don't have full-time employees. We got 15 apprentices that they handle all of this posting. So if you're liking the posting, if you're liking the aesthetics, the flyers, everything, that's my team that does that. So shout out to Ninth Limb team. And so we have Robert Boustany here. If you didn't catch the previous episode, you should go check that out. Senior yoga instructor here in the West and connected in with Himalayan yoga lineages, authentic, real, just ancient Himalayan yoga, the real deal. He was also a professional physicist for 36 years and very smart dude. He brings a lot of the Western science to these Eastern practices, and he's really opened up my practice. I'm very excited to have him here right now. So welcome to my broadcast, Robert. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's a beautiful day here in Houston, Texas. Got up early and did some sun exercises to activate my retinal hypothalamic tract and bring my mind online. A little bit more than just that tract, but some fun practices this morning.
Yeah, what is that? If you would, I'm sure. I mean, it's so interesting. Someone interviewed me yesterday and was asking about like my rituals, my habits of my practices, and it was so interesting because I knew he didn't have much familiarity on some of the jargon that I would say that would make sense to yogis. And I'm sure for you, even if you named things to me that you were doing, I wouldn't know the names of all these things. But if you could make it digestible for everyone, you've been practicing yoga 40, 50, I don't even know how many years.
60 years.
What do you do on your day-to-day?
Well, there's a lot that I do on my day-to-day. Some of my initiation practices with the Himalayan monks. And that certainly makes a gigantic difference in my life. Some of the techniques can be attained free of charge under hansavedas.org. That's an authentic location for
and I'll make sure the link to that gets into the description also.
To kind of put it as simply as I can, there is Ujjayi breathing. Mm-hmm. And Ujjayi breathing is always done in all the pranayamas in Himalayas. And it has an effect on vagus nerves, has relaxation effects. It has certain other energetic effects. Certainly as you're exhaling, the back pressure in your lungs, because you created a restriction and you're making a little bit of sound, it doesn't have to be a sound, can be very slow breath, where the pressure builds in the lungs because you're releasing carbon dioxide. So pressure keeps building in the lungs to get this tremendous transfer of oxygen. Just from Ujjayi, but all pranayama in Himalayas is done with Ujjayi.
Yeah.
So I'm stimulating vagus nerve with that in particular, and then what do? You do certain practices where you're distending the lower belly.
Yeah.
5 fingers below belly button. You have where the little finger is. You have second chakra, and as you're inhaling, you're expanding that core area.
Nice.
That expands, the diaphragm pushes down, and it increases pressure in the lower portion of the pelvis. So you get a rebound effect, which ultimately, once you're more open, will affect cerebrospinal fluid. You begin to oxygenate cerebrospinal fluid, and your control of breathing becomes much better. It also begins to open up a range of different blockages, spinal cord level reflexes, which affect people. Yoga is essentially about removing the inertia brought on by your history. So if you've had suffering in your life, everyone has, then that suffering makes you a little reluctant to do certain things. You won't be so free And I would call that inertia. And what yoga does, and what I do in my practice, is I remove that inertia in my practices. Now, for a practice to really grip you, it's necessary that you have values. If you have very strong values and you're very focused on where you're going, and you're not going to be deterred by arbitrary distractions, now a person can become engrossed and really get into deep meditation. So when people talk about meditation gripping you, what it really grips is it grips your values and develops you in a very different way.
What are you saying? The word is drip or grip?
Grip.
Okay, like clasp.
Yes. So after a period of time, you start finding the experience of meditation and the after effect of meditation. So sometimes I could do it, and I hope this is encouraging to people. Sometimes I'll do a practice in the morning, and intellectually I might say, mentally I might say, well, that wasn't a good practice, but then the rest of the day is incredible. So my judgment of my practice may be wrong, but if I consistently do that particular practice, what am I doing? I'm changing the structure of my neural network. And so now suddenly, instead of having the inertia, the reluctance I might have because of past experiences that were uncomfortable, I suddenly have a little more faith, a little more energy, a little more focus. And I'm more willing to go in a given direction that other people might be fearful about. So it frees you in a very real way. So what I say is yoga removes the inertia from your life. It removes the inertia from your body. And that certainly will make a huge difference long term, because you're this neurological network. If you're more than that, obviously, but you're restructuring yourself to be very successful in dealing with whatever problems come up.
This is
how do you deal with problems? The way you deal with problems is if my mind becomes very precise, very calm, very quiet, I will notice things that other people will not notice.
Yes.
Because my mind is so quiet, I can sense things before they happen, or I can sense things that are very subtle, and it gives me on my freeway of meditation or yoga practice, and I don't miss my exit. If something's going to get me off the freeway, and okay, I can tell a little bit on myself. My sons, I picked up my sons when they were very little, and I'd gone through a divorce, and so I would get them, like every other week or so, and we'd spend some time. And I was driving a little fast. I was very happy that I was with my sons, and my sons were very happy to be with me. And I suddenly went over this overpass on the freeway, and I was going probably too fast. And I got off the exit, and right as I got off the exit, my son said, "Look, Dad." And I looked to my left, and there were two police cars braking really hard that had just passed me. And I thought they were coming after me. So it's like, if you take the right exit, you might get out of trouble. I'm not saying, speed. I'm just saying that if you pay attention, sometimes you'll get out of things that you might not have otherwise. Yeah. Being respectful to the law and so on, that's fine. But sometimes we get into situations that would get us if we don't pay attention. So I want to make one comment about the whole coronavirus thing and so on. Let's do it. CDC recently put on its website that the coronavirus is less deadly, even for people in their 80s. There's really no more deadly. People in their over 65 is less deadly than the usual flu, or certainly no worse. And it's on their website. And they have all the other stuff on there. And it's a flattening of the curve. The flattening of the curve, you have a curve. So you say, okay, we're flattening the curve. Well, if you look at the area under the curve, the area under the curve is how many people are going to get it. It doesn't mean that less people are going to get it. It doesn't mean that there'll be less death. There's no promise of that. Right. Saying, well, we don't want to overload the hospitals. So all of this is not to overload the hospital, which is fine. But it may have been a good idea at the beginning. At this point, it doesn't seem like a good idea.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
all I'm saying.
Man, I tell you, one of the a big echo for me. Okay, one of the things that, I was so fascinated about what I do with yoga is how the stillness and the presence it brings to my communication. I'm still young. I have lots of ambitions. I know I'm going to require a lot of cooperation from a lot of people that are themselves maybe not into yoga to achieve the goals that I have in this life. And so I want to be a very good, effective communicator with all sorts of different kinds of people. But also I want to be bringing my yoga with me. Like Doug Swenson said, you share the yoga. That's the ninth limb. And so it's so interesting, is I made this post about Bill Gates and the vaccine. Apparently there's a patent on the coronaviruses in the United States. And there's now, on November 19th of 2019, which was days before the outbreak started, the European Union Patent Office confirmed the patent by what's the name of the company? I should memorize it. Anyway, it's the name of the company, like PureBright or something. That might actually be it, PureBright. But it's something like that. It's some 2-syllable word. The owner of that company is Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That right after they achieved a patent of the vaccine to the coronavirus, which is the European Union patent, days later, pandemic starts, and now he's biggest push for vaccines for it. And it's just, and then the numbers being doctored. I mean, I don't want to go into all the theories about it actually, but yeah.
There are immunologists that are saying, well, it transforms so quickly that to have a specific vaccine, it could be changed by the time the vaccine's out. So there is no specific vaccine for it.
Oh man. Well, my heart goes out to anyone. If you were affected, I know somebody whose family member has died and it said it was coronavirus. And even if it was or was not, because we know that they're just like attributing things to, they have to report it as corona if it's during these times and whatever. My heart goes out to you for that loss. I don't want to press on if it was corona that really did that or not, but kind of going backwards on this, what you were saying, stilling your mind, being able to perceive, it reminds me of Spider-Man with your spidey senses, to be able to perceive something like right before it happens, as it's happening. It's so fascinating. You're talking about the inertia. I've many times referred to it as the momentum of our mind, that we have this, it's thinking in a way, and we have to like put on the brakes to go a different way with these thought processes. And you're talking about, with the spidey sense, what are your views on, like, let me call it like left-hand path yoga. You could call it like sorcery, or, other kinds of, let's say, mental or cognitive rituals to achieve a kind of insight that you see through space and time, and you have a kind of a spidey sense, or I know I'm using that word, but it just reminds me so much of Spider-Man. Like, what's your take on that as like a valid yoga path to enlightenment?
You better have a good teacher. You better have a good teacher with that kind of thing, because it is possible to get yourself in lots of trouble from doing that kind of thing. And some people, it might be appropriate. It may be charming in some ways for some individuals, but maybe they're emotionally, not psychologically made for that kind of thing. It takes a very strong, fearless individual to walk that kind of path.
Yeah.
And you have to be very clear and very sharp and very undistracted and not easily frightened to do that kind of thing. Because as soon as you get distracted, that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah, that makes sense. And okay, that was like a little tangent. So coming back, you start with Ujjayi breath, distend the lower belly, use this rebound effect off the pelvic floor to rejuvenate your spinal fluid, start burning out spinal level reflexes, which are just maybe ancient, like, like many generations. Maybe it's just a few generations, like the karma of your parents, your grandparents, their decisions that they made in their life. Right. Maybe it's in this life. You were exposed to something as a young child, and that sound of that is like deep in the system. And burning out these reflexes, and then so that you have less reluctance, and you can be.
That comes from that burning out of those reflexes comes when kundalini opens. And it takes time to accept that energy running through you.
Yeah.
People can raise it, and people do all kinds of intense practices to raise it, but it won't stay up. And there can be all kinds of side effects,
Wow.
of which might be insomnia,
Yeah.
which long term would not be a good idea. So the idea is ultimately we start off with the outer body. I won't get into all the details of the different bodies, but we start off with the outer body, and you have embedded in your flesh the result of everything that you've been through. So you might find that someone sees an individual with a given patterned shirt that reminds them of something in their earlier life, and they might have a reaction, positive or negative, doesn't make any difference what it is. But now suddenly they're distracted by whatever's going on. So one point of focus becomes really important. And to get that one point of focus, we start off with the outer physical body, because that's the easiest thing to perceive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you start off and you start cleansing that with various physical yoga practices. And some of the physical yoga practices were to allow the yogis living in high Himalayas to survive a rock fall or falling off a cliff themselves or taking some kind of fall. So all these advanced poses, well, if you can put your foot behind your head, then if you take a fall, you're less likely to tear ligaments in your knee because there's no EMS up there. So you have to be physically really strong and flexible. But by getting, if we talk about the work of Tom Myers and all his work on fascial trains.
Yeah.
The body, maybe we start there, the body is put together with bands of fascia and muscle. So the fascia is a stabilizing structure, but in order to tighten that band, you have to tighten the muscle.
Yeah.
So if you have an individual that's under general anesthetic, you can move their body around any way you want, even if they're very stiff when they're awake. As soon as you put them under general anesthetic, the muscle relaxes.
Wow.
So what does that do? If you think of the bones held together by bands of fascia with embedded muscle, so the muscle can tighten the band. That's how you tighten the bones or loosen the bones. You learn to relax the muscle.
Yeah.
You can also loosen the fascia, but if someone's under general anesthetic, then you can take the stiffest individual and they can easily move around in whatever direction you can move them around. Now, that would be very sore when they get into recovery, but you can move them around. So the number one thing in developing flexibility, which has been misunderstood in the West, the number one thing is you have to relax the muscle when you're stretching. And the process of relaxing the muscle gives you the same flexibility of someone who might be under general anesthetic. What did I say earlier about Ujjayi? I said, all pranayama is Ujjayi, and you have to be relaxed while you're doing all pranayama. Well, if you're very relaxed, the muscle relaxes. As the muscle relaxes, just the weight of your body has a stretching effect, or it puts a certain stress on the fascia. So if my arm is hanging down or my elbows are hanging down, what does that do? It pulls my shoulder down. If my shoulders are hanging down and I balance my head precisely over my lower spine, what does that do? It takes all the weight on the bone structure of my spine. Well, bone is piezoelectric. It's a calcium-phosphate crystal. So it's piezoelectric. It generates currents. So if I sit here very comfortably and relaxed, I can generate currents. If I sit here with my elbows hanging down, relaxed, and I'm not distracted by anything, that I can just get into the feeling of the energy, I can generate energy just by breathing.
Wow, that's
so
true.
my morning practice is just to breathe, and they're complex breathing practices. And for some people, because of the length of time that you're inhaling and exhaling, and the length of time you're holding breath, people might react to that kind of thing. So, as my guru put it, it's like, well, if you hold your breath for a given period of time, you're not going to die from it. So sometimes people get finished with pranayama and they have this sudden
yeah, they're suffocating. Really.
fearful inhale. Well, you're not going to die from that. So over a period of time, you start overcoming the usual embedded fearful reflexes from wherever you got those in your life. Wherever you pick it, even genetically, you pick it up. If there are genetic effects, because you're coming from a given family, it's like, does your family have these diseases? And now they say, okay, well, you have the potential of getting that disease because it's in your family. Right? Genetically, we pick up all kinds of tendencies. If mom had a fear of snakes, well, maybe you have a fear of snakes. Or if dad has a fear of snakes, maybe you have a fear of snakes. Is it your fear of snakes, or is it something that's just embedded in your nervous system that has changed your neural network from maybe a very pure, relaxed state to something where you're reluctant and you're not even sure why you're reluctant? Some of it, you're not even aware of why it came up. You're not even aware. So the first thing is begin to quiet down and clear out all the obstructions, all the things that you're carrying, which aren't you. And you could say, none of it's me. If you're going to create your own life, what do you have to do? You have to let go of everything else. If you want to be filled with something much better, and you're a cup, then whatever you've been carrying and holding on to, and sometimes people hold on to things that they really don't want. And yet they'll hold on because they want to look good in society or whatever reason that they have. It's understandable. People want to be accepted. They want to be loved and accepted. But if you're holding in your cup all of this stuff, then there's no room when you go to guru or some master to fill up with anything else because you're already filled. You have to get rid of all that other stuff. So the first process of physical yoga is clear out all of this stuff.
Wow.
You clear it out and you do practices, the physical practices, such as what you've been teaching. You teach high-level yoga. You clear out their bodies that way. And at first, what are they interested in? Well, maybe I want to look good in bathing suit or something. Okay, that may be or they just want to look physically nicer. Okay, that's a motivation. But at a certain point, they realize, oh, if I stay very quiet inside of myself under certain circumstances, because I've done my yoga, my day goes easy.
Yeah.
And if I get into a crisis and I've done my yoga, it's easier to deal with the crisis. You're not having fear. What's the number one? Well, I'm not saying the number one. What's a cause of reduction in immunity? Fear.
Yeah,
fear, anxiety, all that kind of thing. You
Yeah.
have to take the mind and point it in a given direction. So there's the great story, which I think I've already told, but the great story of Tony Robbins on a racetrack in a high-powered car, and he's got the driver sitting next to him that tells him, if you feel you're going to go into the wall at these high speeds around this track, don't look at the wall. Look where you want to go. And he says, okay, I got it. And he tells the story. Tony tells the story. So he's going around the track very quickly. He starts going into the wall, and the driver doesn't have any controls. He's just sitting there, and he sees him going into the wall, and he grabs his head and turns his head toward the center of the track.
Yeah.
And the car goes that way, and they do that a number of times. And he said, and I learned to look where you're going. Where does energy go? Energy goes where you pay attention. Yeah. So if you're focusing in the wrong direction, you're reducing your own immunity by doing that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not that anybody's right or wrong, but where it's your life.
That's right. Yeah, that's
and
right.
If you only focus where other people point you, well, then you might be very disturbed.
That's true. You know, this is so resonant. It's so all the people in my silent flute program are probably laughing right now because I've been reciting this example from the sitcom Frasier, where he was trying to learn to ride a bicycle and he kept looking at the telephone pole and riding into it. And it's a slower speed example of what you were just saying. And, this where you're putting your attention, on the complaints of life or the negatives, and how you're narrating it to yourself, and you end up kind of manifesting the feelings around that control your actions, or so space inside. This is beautiful. I love what you said about kundalini energy. You're putting words on my hatha yoga experiences. That resonance is a good word. Like, it's really vibing with me, and meaning it's like my experience, my nonverbal or pre-verbal emotional and sensory experience of what I'm doing is adequately and accurately described by your, everything you're saying. So that's beautiful. I wanted to just take a little aside on this thing that you said about piezoelectricity, because what a trip. What a calcium phosphate crystal, piezoelectricity, meaning like the electricity of compression and expansion moving through the bones. And because I was just researching, I like this guy, David Wilcock, who does like alien conspiracies and whatever. And he was talking about like how the pyramids, I mentioned this to you once, about like all these ancient megalithic structures with like big rocks and everything, how they built them. We can't even build them now. And, the idea of that maybe the ancients, through the help of aliens or Atlantis people or whatever, who knows, maybe whatever, maybe they just evolved the knowledge themselves and then they collapsed somehow. Who knows? That through some awareness of how voice and speech works, and possibly, and this would go back to like ancient yogis, how thought works, the thought that comes before the speech, and maybe even further back, I don't know, that through knowledge of how vibrations can resonate with each other and amplify each other, they were able to speak in a way that moved these stones. Due to the piezoelectric effect of these, they were all silicates. All of these Stonehenge, these rocks are silicates, and they're talking about even the rituals inside of these structures, that the energy and the chanting of this, let's say Stonehenge is in a circle, that the resonance would go in a circle and create a kind of a vortex through this piezoelectric effect of the stone. And I don't really have a question about it. I just kind of wanted to throw that out there as like a brain thing. What do you think about that?
Well, certainly.
Physically, does it sound like ridiculous? Because you were a physicist.
No. If you look at, let's take it a place where maybe people can accept it a little bit more. That is true. There are certain types of equations in physics that work with weather. So there are these nonlinear differential equations. And they have certain parameters, and if you alter one of the little parameters in an equation, you get this huge change in effect. So it can go from a storm to a hurricane.
Yeah. So
very tiny little effects can create massive if you line everything up correctly.
Yeah, yeah.
So, laser is an example of that. You take all the different oscillations of light waves and you line them up so that they all become additive.
Uh-huh.
And so you can burn through steel with that kind of thing. And,
yeah.
People kind of accept laser as, well, it's just modern technology, and they accept it, but they don't really understand what's necessarily going on. Yeah. What happens if you take an individual, this is an example, you take an individual who is totally focused on one thing. They're not fearful, they're totally focused. I know a situation where someone was in a van taking care of two little children. This was 40 years ago, 50 years ago. And she was in a van, and the van caught on fire. And in those days, they didn't have gas tanks that couldn't explode. Okay. And so there's flames in the doors in the back of the van, and she's got these two kids. And she said, I quieted myself, and I totally focused, and suddenly I was outside with both kids. We had just gone, broke through the doors, went through the fire, and we were safe on the other side. And things where, a mother sees a child underneath some heavy object and can pick up this heavy object very easily because she's totally focused on what's going on.
Yeah.
You know that if you focus,
Wow.
I mean, this is not so, just to make a point, if I'm sitting and I set my hands in close to my knees, and people can try this kind of thing, it's not necessarily so easy. You exhale, and to lift the legs up with the arms straight while talking is not so easy to do. No. If people will try it, they'll have to bend their arms and so on. But what? I've cleared the energetic pathways in my body. Yeah. So it enables the energy to run. What else? My mind is very quiet. So I'm not against myself. I'm also not trying to prove anything, except to encourage people that you can end your suffering if you focus in the right way. All this energy that you might be focused in the anxiety, in the worry, in the fear, whatever it is, the potential futures. Yeah. You don't know if you're going to live till tomorrow, which is not intended to scare people, but it means use your time now. Don't waste it now. Use it now. Whatever energy you have, whatever little bit you can do right now, do that. Use the time to make yourself stronger. Yeah. It's always a question of focus. And if the pyramid or whatever it is focusing energy to do something, well, first of all, you have to know what you're going to want to do. You don't do the pyramid unless you have some idea what you want to do with the energy in the first place.
Yeah, I guess what came to mind even was that the yogi, like hovering, if you can move a big stone through the piezoelectric effect of these crystal or whatever structures, and internally through the hum of chanting and whatever, it just made it seem a little bit more possible to levitate if this is what's happening in the bones.
There's all kinds of things. And we know for a fact that, should I say it as a fact? The electromagnetic effects of all the microwaves from, Wi-Fi and everything else has an effect on the body. And, it mostly goes unpublished, but it has an effect on your body. So how do you counter that? You have to become stronger than all the forces on the outside of you. And how do you do that? You take all of your concentration and point it in a given direction, and you maintain integrity energetically. So when you choose to do something, you choose to do it for a reason. It's not just random. You're not it's sort of like if you let your mind run wild, except for 20 minutes a day of trying to meditate, well, then the mind will never be quiet. And under a crisis, what will happen? Mind will want to go to whatever interesting distraction.
Can I ask you, when you're talking, besides telling you how great it is, one of the things that just came to mind was I'm no scholar on these things, but the Bhagavad Gita saying of no effort is ever wasted.
Yes.
And what would you have to say? I get a lot of the questions I get revolve around like, should I do this yoga or is this good yoga? Or, and they're not going about it with even 1% of the mindset that you're talking about right now, with maybe an end goal in mind and like to navigate your evolution through this thing. What would you talk about no effort is ever wasted with regards to like a person's starting place with yoga?
Well, as we said at the outset of this, yoga removes certain inertia, certain tendencies, and you become very focused. Well, your practice is an inertia. It's pointing you in a given direction. It's taking all the energy and going in a given direction. And so what ends up happening, the strength of the path you're moving along, because if you have an object and it's going at a high rate of speed, you can't turn it off that path very easily.
Right.
So if you have an individual that's focused entirely on the negativity associated with their life, their creative negativity, that's not funny. And they're going to be on that path. And you're not going to turn them very easily. You have to be patient with them. That's probably the most important thing about a teacher, is to be patient with them. Give them a chance. It's going to take a while. You're not going to turn them off of whatever direction they're going. There's very strong emotions, very strong reactions inside of them. It takes time for them to change. And so you have to be patient. And what do you know inside of them? Well, they were once a child, and their mother held them. It's Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to everyone. And their mother held them. And the mother looked at this baby. That baby is not contributing to the gross economic product.
Yeah.
And we judge our society based on standards like that. Mother is holding it. Why does mother love babies so much? She feels the life. She recognizes her own life. When do you as an individual, when are you, if you were like that little baby held by your mother and you were so valued by her and you were offering nothing except your presence, your life, the purity of being, not even knowing anything, you can't give any knowledge. You're just there. You're just this beautiful little being that's there. When are you no longer valuable? How old do you have to get before you're no longer valuable? And the fact is, you have to find that love inside of you. You have to see that all these older people, younger people, whoever they are, they all have life. They're all valuable because they're alive. And you would be alone. I would be alone in the midst of all eternity. Here we are. In the midst of all eternity, I showed up and I get to enjoy interacting with you. And I would be alone if you didn't exist. And what life is not valuable? Which life is not valuable? So the inertia, to answer your question, the inertia that you have, if you take that particular focus and you get up and you say, I was given this body, I don't know how it came, you don't have to know. I was given this body, I'm going to take care of this body. And I'm going to take care of this body because the only way I can take care of the people that I love is to take care of my body. So my practice every morning is me telling every person I know that I love them. And I cannot help you unless I am strong. So I make myself strong so that I can do something in this world. So I'm not a burden on other people. And the inertia of that practice will carry into, if there's another lifetime, the next lifetime. It will carry me through, because the beauty of that fulfills you inside of yourself, independent. You can be doing anything. And if you feel that love inside of yourself, if you feel that intensity and that appreciation of life inside of yourself, if you respect all people because you know that inside of yourself, you value them, because I would be alone if you were not here. And every person, whoever they are, it can be some homeless person that's on drugs or alcohol or whatever, and you can listen to them. They will tell you something that might be important if you pay attention. Life is always talking to you. So yeah, when you get to no effort is ever wasted, provided the effort is going in a direction, a focused direction, to take you from wherever you are to a better place. And where do people want to look? They always look for what is going to fulfill me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you see kids playing video games and you think, that's not so good. I'm going to tell you a story about my sons. My sons were playing video games. It used to be, they had these monitors that were 60 hertz. So the scan rate was 60 hertz. And both of my sons came to me and they said, Dad, we can see the scan rate. We have to unconcentrate our minds so we can play the game. Because we're so concentrated. It's true. They were so concentrated they could see the scan rate. So they understood what was creating this. And they wanted to play the game. Yeah. You know what I told them? I said, life is the best video game. Yeah. Life is the best video game. It has multiple levels. It has infinite number of plots and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
Why don't you enjoy life?
Yeah.
And they're amazing. They're amazing. They're amazing kids. They're
What an
amazing
analogy.
kids. At whatever age they are now, they're full-grown men now.
Yeah. Yeah, that'll adjust their perspective when they see life as a game like that. And I wish I had heard that forever, but I guess I heard it when I needed to. My imagination can help but get carried away when you're like, they were so concentrated that they saw this hertz rate with the screen renewing. And it's like, if you get so focused in on life, I wonder, can you see life renewing? You know, you get in, you start to see the frequencies of life the way that they were seeing the frequencies of a television.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Oh, we're blowing minds right over here. So let's get to, I'm sure we got comments. I saw something from DC. If you guys got anything, we had a question on here from Instagram. Let's see here. What you got on Facebook? Okay, if you guys got any comments or anything, type it out. We'll go with Zoom first because you can always come to the Zoom. Let's see. DC has a way of asking these super controversial questions. So let me filter this a little bit. Oh, he started practicing belly breathing. So I was teaching people a certain diaphragm isolation. That's what my online belly breathing video series. And I have them lay on their belly and give them verbal cues to feel how their skin, their flesh is expanding onto the ground as they breathe and without moving their chest. So, and then with some descriptive language for what the shape of the diaphragm is and everything. So they can really start to isolate this thing. And eventually what I was terming as this idea of tensioning, like tensioning a nerve, which I got from Simon Borg Olivia in Australia. I mean, I'm sure it's a term. I just, that's where I picked it up from, was tensioning a nerve. So I would talk about tensioning the phrenic nerve that kind of has its tentacles in the diaphragm, and starting to feel that nerve as you diaphragm isolate. And then he says, do you push the belly to the maximum? And okay, so this will be a private question for me, DC, because that's going to be on, the things that I've taught you. So save that, send me a private message, and I'll answer that.
When I would say this much about diaphragmatic breathing, where you're distending the abdomen.
Yeah.
The idea, it's case dependent. On a given day, you may be very strong. On a given day, you may not be so strong. So as you're expanding, you have to sensitively do it so that, yes, you're making effort, but you're not straining, because as soon as you create tension in the body, you can't pull in as much product. You become distracted by the effort rather than the technique. So that much I could say.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what do you think about, so as I expand my abdomen by contracting my diaphragm, and I'm looking to minimize the effort, the metabolic effort to do this inhale. And I like to feel this very subtle nerve sensation. It's like a line from the hood of the diaphragm up behind the heart, or it feels like it's behind the heart, and then like up into my head. And I don't really have a question. I see a pathway to, and this is where I'm at. Well, I guess one of the most valuable aspects of having you here on the show is I can, more than almost anywhere else, voice the edge of my experience, and you seem to take it away and like add to it.
I mean, when you're talking about feeling that particular pathway, I think it's good to explore and see how everything is connected. But then ultimately you go back to this core, expanding the core and feeling the rebound effect on the base of the pelvis, and then you retire into the spine. So at a certain point, you're developing, what helps people develop concentration? Interest. If they're interested, they'll concentrate.
Fair.
And so if you're exploring things and it's interesting, that's developing your concentration. That's developing, if you will, the momentum, or you could say the inertia of your concentration. And at a certain point, you apply that inertia in a direction that's more focused toward the base of the pelvis and then into the spine. So it's progressive. There's no, it's like something like, I don't know, Montessori school or so on, where you take kids and you let them sort of enjoy life and explore and gain, and they'll all learn how to read, but you slow it down. You don't force them to do something that you want. Let them explore a little bit, and you just give a directive. So what a teacher does is you just give a little directive. Say, okay, stay in these bounds and look what's here. Because if you go out too far, you'll never be able to find what's in here. So you have to stay in here. So you start off and you say, okay, physical body. And then later it's like, okay, maybe lungs, maybe diaphragm, maybe belly. And then eventually you get into spinal cord. Now you have to really be focused to be there. You can't do it otherwise.
That makes sense. Yeah. Wow. You were saying, I was getting carried away. Oh, I got a message from my girl. She says she really liked this one time I said something about people who play video games. They're playing a video game inside of a video game. So it's like, if you ever played a video game playing a character and like your character in the game was playing a game and you were like, you know, and that it's so funny because I start thinking as you're describing, my mind is getting, you know, just creating imagery as you're talking. And I'm like, in this video game of life, I'm playing yoga. And it's like, if I was playing a video game and I was having my character do yoga, and it's like, it was just,
and absolutely the case. It's like, who are you really?
Yeah.
That's the quest in yoga. The ultimate quest is, who are you really?
Who are you what? What is the word?
Who are you really?
Who are you really?
Who are you?
We'll go. Okay, so we have an audience question, and I'd love your take on this. Let's see. We have, he says, what do you, tell me, this is a drug-related question. Tell me, what do you think about smoking weed?
Well, since I haven't, I wouldn't know. But
all right.
What I can tell you is, let's put it a different way. One of my teachers, very psychic, who never did drugs, used to go around with people who were doing drugs, and she'd teach them meditation. And we'd get together.
Yeah.
And this is when I was in graduate school, so 1970. And I would teach them yoga. And after a period of time, they started finding that some of the enjoyment they got and the relaxation they got from the yoga became cumulative. So the state of relaxation that they could hold without taking anything was continuous, and then it begins to deepen. And it does. It begins to deepen over a period of time where you're very, very relaxed all the time. Is my intellect sharp? Yes, my intellect is sharp. How did my intellect get sharp? Because I developed my ability to focus. And I developed my ability to focus. Now, can we be useful? Yes, absolutely. Maybe someone wants to get a given effect very quickly. But ultimately, you want to be independent.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
I would like to be independent.
Yeah.
You know, it's becoming, it's really interesting because there's some federal laws which don't accept it, and there are state laws that do accept it. So there's that kind of fighting back and forth between government.
Yeah, bureaucracy, friction.
But well, you know, we're seeing more of that now. But nonetheless, so I can't really speak to it, but I can speak for yoga. I can speak for practicing Tai Chi. I can speak for practicing anything where you concentrate yourself and you learn that you have an infinite capacity for possibilities of creative self-expression, of intelligence. And so, you know, if it's helpful, it's helpful for you. I can't speak to that. And not for me to judge either. Not for me to judge. As long as you're being kind to the other people in your world, wonderful. But at a certain point, when I became initiated in the particular meditation, they said, don't take anything.
Yeah.
Do your practices. And so I took that. Where does that come from? That comes from thousands of years of people practicing yoga. And they
Yeah.
passed on this information to me, so that's what I practice.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. There you go, Nikki. And it was basically, similar ideas. I would go deeper into, it's where, it's what is the mind, the quality of mind that you're bringing to the experience. And the marijuana is going to amplify characteristics and traits of your personality and of your processing of life. And it may even wake up some dormant things and make some of your subconscious brighter to you, which can be a distraction, but it can also yield a kind of a dirty corner in the room that you didn't know was there. But of course, habitually, anything habit, basic foundation is exactly what Robert said. Like, you want to be independent. And if you're not, then you're dependent. And if you're dependent, then there's going to be some suffering that's going to come from that eventually.
I had a good friend that sent me some videos on experimental use of psilocybin. And they found that individuals with one dose of some given level, I don't know what it is, were no longer depressed. And in a large number of people, they were no longer depressed.
Yeah.
And that occurred because they said I'm not a psychologist, so I can't really speak to this. They said there was a trait of openness that developed. And as they developed this trait of openness, they could let go of lots of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I know, like, my son is very focused on Advaita Vedanta. So he just observes. It's like, who am I? He's always asking that kind of thing. I know someone else who has a little tattoo on their body talking about, remember, we are eternal. All this pain is an illusion. And what do they say in the book of the great Advaita Vedanta? Nisargadatta Maharaj. He'll say, same kind of thing, that pain and pleasure are waves and troughs on an ocean of bliss. And because of our dependency, the mind choosing one thing is pain and one thing, and I'm not saying I'm beyond this. I say, look carefully, and you will find. And so, my friend went through tremendous amount of pain. And when they're going through a tremendous amount of pain, what do? They go inside. And they go through it. How do you get through the fire? To go back to the previous example with the woman in the van with the two little kids.
Yes.
How do you go through the fire? You become completely focused. You become completely self-contained, and you decide where you want to be, and you go.
Yeah.
And it takes tremendous courage to do that kind of thing. And it's not the path for everyone. But again, you have to have developed so much concentration that you can take all of your energy and all of your focus and reach a point very quickly without feeling like you're going in between. So I sit for meditation. And I can sit for a long period of time. Maybe not as long as some, but longer than most people would sit. And what happens? It's like, you feel like, where did the time go?
Right.
It's like you begin to feel in that moment, just for a short period of time, you don't know it's a short period of time, you start feeling this is what eternal is. Eternal.
Totally. Yeah. Wow.
Not being distracted from anything except a pure experience in that particular moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So accepting of it that nothing else changes. Okay, I'm running long.
Well, it should have just saved a life. That was great because, the measure of time would be movement of particles. It's movement.
Right.
So if your mind is still, then there would be no time in the mind. It makes sense. There's nothing moving. Oh, what a trip. Well, I have one final question. If we were to continue for however long, I would go into concentration. I would start asking you about that. I know DC here has a question. He says, to direct it at you, Robert, how would you teach someone to slow down their heart rate?
The first thing that you do to slow down the heart rate is don't concentrate on the heart. You start off a little bit differently. You begin to you have to be comfortable being physically still. That's the first thing that's necessary to slow down the heart. Now, in some cases, and understand, slowing down the heart can be useful, but you can do certain pranayama. So again, I'd refer you to the hansavedas.org site and start exploring pranayama there, because pranayama.
I think, in particular, I think he might have like maybe something where it like sometimes wakes up with like a nightmare or something, like a racing heart kind of thing.
Right. So to begin to, and that's the idea. The idea is you begin to release certain tension that is built up over a lifetime. Maybe it's genetic, maybe it's spinal cord level reflex, maybe it's something else. The simple technique that you use is you begin to exhale from the mouth very softly, so you feel the warmth of the breath softly crossing the lips, as if incense has smoke rising very slowly, you exhale as if the smoke covering the heart is coming out. And you do it not when you're reacting, you can do it when you're reacting, but you do it as a regular practice. Anytime emotion comes up, just a little bit of emotion. So you get good at taking a little bit of emotion and dispersing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one technique. The other technique that I would say is look at the technique Parvatasana. And I don't have time to, I guess, teach you here. Sure. But what you would do is you would take the arms overhead, and as you're in this particular position with the arms back, you inhale, hold the breath. So you inhale and hold the breath for the same length of time. Then you exhale and hold the breath. Then back to center. So you twist to each side, always inhaling back to center. Okay. Lean to one side, lean to the other side. Twist to one side, twist to the other side. Lean forward, lean back. And each breath, you inhale, back to center, hold the breath. Exhale in whatever direction you're going and hold the breath. That's it.
Yeah, I can see that.
And what it will do is if you're prone to panic attacks, you might get close and you can stop at that particular point. Yeah. But then you'll learn to go through that particular feeling. And what will happen is it will disperse all of this built up energy. And eventually, it won't take an infinite amount of time for you to release it all. It's a finite amount of time, depending on how long you practice.
Yeah.
How consistently you practice. You need to be consistent, but it will stop that.
Wow. No, that's great. And DC, I'll help translate it and everything. I'm sure you picked up everything, but I'm going to be exploring that because that sounds really great. And that imagery of that breathing, like you said, I'll be tapping all my emotions now and translating it to the smoke of my heart being exhaled like incense. As this incense stick here finishes, it's been burning exactly an hour for the time of our podcast. And it was very easy to just convert that energy of my body into the image and like flow it out. Wow.
Just very, very briefly.
Yeah.
Below the storms that you feel emotionally around your heart, below those storms is the most beautiful place you will ever imagine. And if you can go through the storms with courage, or at least with patience and trust, then you can find that place.
Definitely. Wow. We could keep going forever. I think you have immense wisdom, Robert. And I know I can speak for everyone on all of this. There was about 20 people across the channels that were watching live, and a lot of people are going to catch this. thank you for dishing out your knowledge for free. It was beautiful. And
very much. Anytime.
is there anything you'd like to say to the audience as far as like if you got any online programs coming up or anything you'd like them to know about?
They can look at pralayayoga.com, and I've got online classes all the time, so they can check those out.
Yeah. All right. pralayayoga.com. I'll have that on the description. If you're catching this on iTunes or YouTube, you know what to do. Leave a review, subscribe, and let us know. Let me know if you want Yogi Robert back. I think we're going to have him back for part 3. His time is very valuable, so we'll see when that's going to happen. But I think sooner than later. Thank you, everyone. If you liked this video, if you saw it on social media or something, share it. Share this with people. Share Science of Peace podcast with people. And Yogi Robert, from my heart to yours, thank you for coming on my show.
Brother, I appreciate it very much.
Namaste, brother.
Namaste.